Welcome back to If I Knew You Better. I'm Brendan Davis, and my guest this week is Carl BRESSLER. Carl is a business advisor and an actor with an extensive career in Hollywood and a profound business network around the world. I'm going to include his LinkedIn in the show notes at crazyinagoodway.com, and he accepts all comers there. So if you enjoy the show, you can check that out to learn even more about him. We talked for an hour and a half, and we still barely scratched the surface. And part of why we were able to talk like this is because Carl is also one of my most important mentors and closest friends. If I had a big brother from Detroit, it would be Carl. We first met in 2008 officially. We had actually bumped into each other, we realized, a few years previous, but it seems like I've known Carl a lifetime. And I don't want to sound like I'm laying it on too thick here, but my life has expanded exponentially in the time that I have known Carl, in large part to the positive example he set in various ways, as well as the excellent guidance that he's given me at some pretty crucial moments in my life, personally and professionally. Now, given what I just said, going into this interview, I didn't think that I even could know Carl better, but for all that I thought I knew, he still managed to surprise me. He has a way of doing that with people in a very good way. And lastly, it's a nice coincidence that this interview happens to be going live on Carl's birthday. So I'm really happy to be able to share my talk with him on this very special day for him. So happy birthday, Carl. And now, please enjoy the show. Carl BRESSLER, it's a pleasure to sit down with you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
How do you introduce yourself to people who you would like to know better?
I usually say I'm present and available, and what they've done impresses me, and say it cogently why the things they've done in their life impress me, and whether or not that's inspiring because it's something I want to do, or whether it's inspiring because it's something I wouldn't do or wouldn't even thought of, but that they've put time and great effort into and had success and accomplished, and that the world's a better place. Because I guess most of the people I'm impressed with and would hope to get to know me better are people who've done things to make the world a better place. I'm certainly kind of over the celebrity thing. So fame itself, for its own ends, is not that attractive to me, but people who do things and use their life well, I'm always impressed with.
I love that answer. I think that's a model for a fantastic answer, especially if you're wrapped up in the entertainment business.
Yeah.
As you are and have been. And
lucky to be.
Yeah.
Some of the entertainment things I've been involved with, which got me into the technical arts, also broke me out of entertainment and put me into technology. And that unexpected, unintended consequence of representing technical artists in the film and television and commercial and music video and games world brought me into doing business with people and learning from people that I would never have met in a million years. And gave me opportunities to look through windows and be walked into rooms that I never would have seen just as a straight entertainment producer, director, whatever. In a way, closest to what a writer goes through when they're researching projects where the story is far away from who they are, and whether it's their time or their culture or just the kinds of people that they grew up with versus the kinds of characters they're creating. Getting to do that kind of research, but in real life with real people, in industries that have no direct connection to entertainment, but are for a project or for a moment, the worlds intertwine.
I got to meet you, and we don't have to tell the long version of the story, although I've told it, I've enjoyed telling it in different contexts, but I got to meet you on a panel at Sony that was essentially about indie production, and I was probably the most junior person on the panel, and you were one of the most senior. But we ended up sharing a mic the way that they had the stage set was 6 chairs and 2 people shared a mic. And I remember we had some kind of an issue with, was it actually a mic that broke, or was that a default, or was it, how did it work that we were sharing a mic? Was that the design, or did someone's mic fail?
Well, that's a great question. It's seeing as it was March 16th, 2008. I can't guarantee you that I remember that. I remember the
it was partly cloudy that day.
Remember, yeah, I do remember very clearly being underwhelmed with the questions that we were being asked by the moderator And I remember at one point breaking the rhythm of the room, which was descending quickly into somnambulance, and having and looking at you, holding the mic and looking directly at you, and saying, "You have beautiful blue eyes."
I remember this very
I remember
well.
that, and I remember the collective room taking a breath, and then everybody laughed, and then we were off to the races. And I kind of remember taking over the questions and the answers from the moderator, which did not make us friends, but it made you and me friends. And that's how we met. And then there's other stories, obviously, of our experiences together through the years.
Yeah. But that was where I got to have the crash course. And then over time of getting to know you, I've been really fortunate to call you a friend and a mentor, and to have also been in rooms, whether directly or indirectly, on purpose or as just a result of being there, where you also were engaged in conversations about helping people to either solve a problem or figure out their path. You were nice enough to speak to a group of students for me a few times. But
one of those times you paid me very well, which I didn't realize until afterwards was out of your own pocket. Yeah. Which I felt bad about until the fact that you got feedback saying that everybody was like thrilled to have me there. The thing that thrilled me about being in the room with you and with those students was not that they liked what I had to say, but was that I was able to do something that had never been done for me. Mm-hmm. And when I was in school, or when I was in any kind of what so-called would have been a mentoring situation. If you remember, we did the workshop or the guest lecture in two halves.
Right.
And I used the first half to talk about every way I'd failed in my life, personally and professionally, for literally an hour and a half. Mm-hmm. And then everybody took a break. And I thought, no one's going to come back because this loser, what's he going to teach?
Something about really high.
Right. And then I came back in and I spoke about successes. And everybody got very excited about that. And then I said, this is, whether you realize it or not, this is probably the last chance you as a group are ever going to have to be part of a gang before you all go out into the world and are individuals trying to join other people's gangs that have been put together years before you got there. And it's important that while this semester is happening or while you're in the school together, that you understand how you might work together and how you might build relationships for later. So we're going to go around the room and we're going to start, and everybody's going to stand up and say, first, I'm really good at, and then you'll say what you're really good at, and then say, I really could use help with, and so you can help with. And by going around the room, everybody's going to get a sense of what everybody's good at least what they believe they're good at. And with the room, we'll also know where people need help. So if you're good at something where someone else needs help, you can offer value before requesting attention for your own goals, which is the cleanest and most honorable way to make a new business relationship, because you've come there offering value first. They've told you that they have a need that you can impart or show up for. And in doing so, now you have the right to have their attention for whatever things you need or want to do. So that was my fun with being in your class, was getting to do that in a room full of people where no one ever did that for me or any group I was in, where they said, okay, you're going to be a gang now. Everybody compare notes. What are you good at? What do you need help with? And let's see what we can cause out of this.
Well, I know that we don't have, we're aiming for about an hour or so, and I would love to be able to do the highlight reel of your kind of amazing journey while leaving plenty of time to talk about the here and the now and the future and what you're working on, what you're thinking about looking ahead, because that's really where I want us to end. But you have, I'm lucky to know you well enough that I know so many pieces of your story. But I mean, could you start, where did you come from? What do you consider to be your roots? And how did that set you on this path to be where you are today?
Well, I was born and raised in the city of Detroit, and then after the riots in a city called Huntington Woods. Huntington Woods is a square mile, most famous for the guy who took the Pentagon Papers, Daniel Ellsberg. He stored them in his grandparents' basement, which was in Huntington Woods, Michigan, that square mile. And nobody knew that. And that's where he kept them while he was was turning the tables on what he considered to be a corrupt government that was sending children of Americans to die in a war that they knew they couldn't win. Anyway, I grew up in Detroit. My father was born and raised in New York City, in a part of New York City called Washington Heights, which is more commonly thought of as part of Harlem, which at the time he grew up was mostly Italian, Irish, Jewish, and some Eastern Bloc people, Czechs and Polish and stuff. And then he grew up in New York City, and my mother grew up in Philadelphia, and they met after World War II in the city of Detroit. My father was a captain in the First Army in Europe. He saw action in Belgium and then moved into France, and then after France into Germany and into Berlin. And he spent a year from June 5th of 45 to 46 in plain clothes, in close quarters, hunting the Nazis who were unable to get out of Berlin and couldn't be turned in, and were trying to shoot the Allied officers, trying to kill the victors by killing the snake at the head. So there was a group of people that were out hunting those people as those people were trying to snipe at admirals and generals. And he left his gun in Berlin and came home in 46. My dad in New York City was a boxer as well, a bare-knuckle boxer. And one of the things he wanted to be an accountant and an efficiency expert, but he didn't have money to go to college. So that's how he got into the National Guard, and they did a test. And he unfortunately made it into officers training, which was at the end of 42. So in 43, he immediately was shipped to Europe. And that's why he saw so much action there. So I grew up with a military dad, and my mother was an artist and a rebel. She was definitely an artist and a piano player. And she had played in what they called the Black and Tans, which were the nightclubs in Detroit that sprung up in the late 30s, early 40s. As more and more men got shipped off to war, the people that were left were usually women of all colors, and then usually foreigners or disabled men who were either Caucasian or African American. And all those people worked together in the factories, and they got to know each other, and they partied together because everybody else was gone. And so this whole culture grew up of white and black people hanging out together. And that went on until Henry Ford got tired of it, because he wanted to separate the blacks and the whites again after the war so he could use the blacks as scabs. And he brought in a bunch of gangsters from Chicago to shoot up those clubs with shotguns and separate the people again in 47, which of course led to 20 years later the riots in Detroit in 67. Anyway, so that's my parents. You've got my dad is a military guy, doesn't drink, smoke, or swear, never raises his voice, never starts a fight, always finishes them. You don't want to fight my dad. And you've got my mom, who is an artist and plays piano like a maniac and smokes, drinks, swears, and tells the most sexual jokes you've ever heard. And they fall in love. They meet each other and fall in love. My mom married somebody first, but she annulled that marriage after 6 months because she said she married him because he looked like Errol Flynn, but after 6 months she realized that's all he could do. And she got rid of him. And my dad was a very different guy. My dad was the Jimmy Stewart type. Didn't ever look for attention, just came in and worked hard. He was in women's ready-to-wear selling dresses and coats. And my mom's father was a glazing contractor in the glass business, putting glass in buildings and selling it wholesale to school districts and factories. And my grandfather looked at my dad and at a certain point said to him, "Why don't you come work for me?" And my dad said, "I don't really want to work for people anymore. I'd like to be my own boss." And my grandfather made him an offer in 1949. He said, "You move far enough away that your place doesn't compete with mine. You can use my name, West Detroit Glass," which was started in Detroit in 1920. "And you can not have COD, cash on delivery. You can get 90-day dating, and you can build a business and get paid before you have to pay for your glass and do all that." And my dad started his business in 1950, called it West Detroit Glass of Pontiac, and it ran successfully till he sold it well in 1980 when he found out I didn't want to do that. Now, how that gets to me.
Yeah.
So I got my mom playing piano. Me Deluxe Lewis beat me Daddy 8 to the bar. And I've got my dad, coming home and after a hard day's work and wanting to read the paper, pay the bills, maybe watch some TV and kiss his wife. And I have a sister, an older sister. And I have an experience when I'm 8 years old where my parents get me a horse for my birthday to ride on. My grandfather, who rode horses on my mother's side, is there, and I get on the horse, and it's smelly, and the horse's hairs stick into me, and I cry. I'm 8 years old. So everybody's afraid that I'm going to be on the wrong side of the fence because I'm obviously a little bit weak, and my mom wants me to get male patterning. So she asks my dad to bring me to the pool hall, not for about a year or two. I think I'm 10. Yeah. And my dad's supposed to start bringing me to the pool hall on Tuesday, the bowling alley, which has a pool hall. Okay. And when I'm 10. So I go to the pool hall with my dad. I hate the sound of the bowling balls, and I hang out in the cool area. When I say cool, I mean it's air conditioned, which is the pool. And I watch the pool players play pool. And I sit there every Tuesday for 2 years till I'm about 12. And the owner of the bowling alley and pool hall likes to play pool. And he's watched me there every Tuesday for 2 years. And he meets me with my dad one day, and he says to my dad, "Hey, do you mind if I teach your kid to play pool?" And at that time, AMF had just bought the big pool table business, and it was a family sport. Yeah. And so this guy took me under his wing, and within a year I was shooting for money, and I was 13.
Wow.
I got involved in some of the games where they would play $50 a ball. And this is 1970.
A lot of money today.
A lot of money. Man. $50 a ball, what they called 14-1 competition, up to 125 or 150, $50 a ball, and you paid the difference. Whoever won had to pay the difference of how many balls were between. And as a player, you would be bet on, and most of the bettors didn't involve the players, but some would bet on a player, and they would give them a split of the action, kind of like a tip in the dealer thing. Okay. But if the player won, then they'd get a tip. But if the player lost, they didn't owe anything. That wasn't done that way. Right. But anyway, so I got a lot of experience in the pool hall between the time I was 13 and the time I was 15, when a band that had been watching me play in the pool hall walked up to me and said, "We like the way you talk to your opponents. Will you manage us?" And I said, "No, thanks. You have long hair. Get away from me." And they said, "We'll let you drive our car. We see you hitchhike here and hitchhike home. It's Detroit. It's the snow. Yeah. We'll let you drive our car if you'll use it to get us jobs at the various high schools around the city." And I said, "Well, let me see the car." And I walked out with them. But by then I brought my pool cue with me just in case. And they handed me the keys to a 1965 Pontiac Catalina, which I drove around the block by myself and came back. And was in the music business when I came back. Nice. And every high school that I made an appointment to show my band's tape and picture to get them a job at the next high school, somehow someone in that high school principal's office got word to the local band, and the local band would be waiting outside for me to pull up in the driveway to walk in, and they'd see me coming, and they'd say, "Get out of here. This is our high school. Mm-hmm. We're the band here." And I would say, "Come on, guys, I'm just here to sell my band. Get out of my way." And they'd say, "We'll kick your ass." And I'd never said it first. I always waited. And I would laugh, and I would say, "I'm going to break every one of your fingers." And my dad's a boxer. What's your dad? And I came here to sell my band, and you're going to get out of my way. And if you're any good, you're going to give me your tape and picture. And when I go to the next school, I'll not only sell my band, but I'll sell you guys too. But either way, you get out of my way. Yeah. So by the time I was 17, I had 10 bands. And
broken a lot of fingers.
I hadn't really broken any fingers. I think I bitch slapped a couple of people that were stupid because they were big and dumb kind of thing. Yeah. And I was like my dad. I was thin and wiry. And you never fight the thin and wiry guys. They have nothing.
Y'all now see it coming.
Yeah, they're fast. So, and my dad was fast, and he taught me to keep my right up by introducing me to the ceiling.
By putting you there. With
I would count the stucco dots.
The right undercut.
Yeah. So so anyway, I don't mean to make it sound like that was violent, but
I understand.
He wanted me to be able to defend myself. And by the time I was 17, I had these bands, and I started to break out of the high schools and go to the nightclubs in Detroit. And some of the bouncers there were football players or other guys who I knew who were my age. But they were lying about their age to get the job to be the bouncer. Right. And so they couldn't really not let me into the club. They couldn't
bust you because
I could bust them. And I wore a tie, which was really funny at that time.
Sure.
I would wear a tie. And one of my favorite lessons was there was a guy who managed a nightclub called the Coral Gables. And there's a million stories here. Sure. But one of my favorite stories was the guy who he was like, "So you're a hot guy. You're a hot manager guy, huh? You're a big deal." And I said, "No, I'm a new deal. I'm hoping to be a big deal someday, but I'm working my way up." And he said, "Well, I'll tell you what. Let's drink a couple of flaming chartreuses, and after that, let's do business." And so he lights up these 151 green chartreuse.
I don't even know what's in there, but it sounds dangerous.
Well, it's 151 proof, and it's he lights them up, and he gives me one, and he goes bottoms up, and I watch him, and he throws it down his throat, and so I do the same thing, and I, of course burn the inside of my mouth because he knows that he knows to blow it out, and I'm 17. So then immediately after doing that, he goes, "So, what do you want to talk about?" My mouth burning.
Literally burned your throat.
He knows what he's done.
Jeez.
But that was, Detroit was a little bit of a hard place, I started going downtown to, because some people wanted me to work with some bands that were horn bands, black bands. And I loved black music. I grew up in Detroit, for Christ's sake. So Motown was in my blood. And I would go to this one place called the 20 Grand, where I would be the only white guy in the club. And someone started calling me Danny.
Okay.
And no one knew my name except for the bands. And so all the people would call me Danny because I was comfortable walking among them because I meant no one any harm. And no one was mad at me. I was one guy walking around. And I didn't understand why they called me Danny until one guy finally said, "Well, you're like dandruff. You're the only white guy in the room." You're like, so that was one of my nicknames, Danny.
That's pretty great.
Yeah, that was great. And I hung out in these places like Baker's Keyboard Lounge and the 20 Grand and the Rooster Tail downtown. And by the time I was 19, I had more bands, and I came to LA and I set up appointments. I had always pushed my bands to write original material because I said that, that it's great to cover copy songs, great to get the club audiences dancing.
Right.
But if you're going to ever do anything besides be a local, you're going to have to write original material, and you're going to have to write good songs. And that's what will give you a life outside of Detroit. Because most of us never expected to get out of Detroit anyway. Anyway, I got a couple of meetings in LA when I was 19. So I flew out here with a buddy of mine at the time who ended up not being one. But I flew out and I had meetings with managers, what they used to call song pluggers,
right?
Which are professional managers for publishing houses that look to sign original writers and present, like Artist and Repertoire, present those artists' original material to writers to stars or musicians they work with to place songs. And I had a meeting with some managers because I was looking to affiliate with a manager who had a strong West Coast, who was bigger than me, to bring a group of acts from Detroit that played original songs, both rock and roll and soul. And I was on my way to that meeting with this guy who managed Dionne Warwick at the time. And a woman doing 40 miles an hour slammed into me at La Cienega and Sunset, pushing my car all the way through the intersection and destroying the back of the car, literally putting the taillights in on the dashboard.
Wow.
And my head through the windshield. Jeez. And I remember seeing my sunglasses hit the windshield and then my face go meet them. And I was a tough kid, and I got out of the car. I crawled out of the car, and everybody was freaked out that I crawled out of the car. And I walked back to her and said, "Are you okay?" And she looked at me drunkenly and said, "I'm late for an appointment." And so I sat on the curb, and they came and they looked at me, and they made me go to UCLA. They said, "Get in the ambulance." I said, "I'm not getting in the ambulance." And they said, "Go to UCLA." So I went to UCLA, and they took x-rays. But they didn't see, they said, "You're going to be black and blue." And they wrapped me.
Okay.
And I didn't know it at the time, but I was about to have what they called, at that time, strangely enough, Dressler's syndrome.
Okay.
One consonant different than mine.
Yeah.
2 letters later. But it was what they call a myocarditis and a pericarditis, which is inflammation of the heart muscle and of the heart lining. Okay. And they rub against each other, and the heart muscle pushes through the heart lining. A fluid is secreted, which busts through the lining, collapsing both lungs, and you're dead, basically. Your heart blows open or you can't breathe. And but I was a strong kid, so I'd been put on muscle relaxants and painkillers from the accident, and I got myself back to Detroit. And it was 2 weeks later, and I thought I was okay. and I went to work on one of my dad's glass trucks, and I picked the Solo truck because that's the truck you got the best work on because you have a crane and you're craning crates of glass, 1,200-pound crates of glass, and you're basically pushing the crane around, and there's teams of people wherever you go who take them and put them on rollers, and so it's not like delivering one light of glass putting in. So anyway, about 3 days into it, I was having chest problems, and I went to the doc, and he said, "Stop smoking so much." He didn't even check anything. Yeah. And then that night, I woke up unable to breathe, fell on the floor in my room, crawled to my parents' bedroom, pulled my mother off the bed on top of me. She screamed, lights went on, and I was blue. I was looking at them, and I was blue.
Wow.
So they took me in my underwear in the snow to Royal Oak Beaumont Hospital, and the guys looked at me and took 2 big needles. I'd never seen syringes. Yeah, and just poked them in my chest, and the stuff started coming out, and they said both his lungs are collapsed. And they cut a hole in this one here and to drain it, and they put me on heavy doses of cortisone, and they diagnosed me as having idiopathic myocarditis and pericarditis, which means we don't know what the hell it is. And they because the accident in California happens 4 to 6 weeks earlier, they couldn't say for sure. They couldn't directly connect it. But they did say it was a bouncer's disease, that what happened when people get stomped, they get pericarditis, myocarditis, and they get their chest stomped.
Jeez.
So I hit the steering wheel very hard.
Right.
So I had to lay in bed for 1 year and 2 months waiting for my heart to shrink back to size, during which time they intravenously pumped me full of steroids, full of cortisone. So I had the double whammy of atrophying from laying in bed and bloating from being in the cortisone.
Right. People who hear steroids because I used to be into bodybuilding. And so people think, that's, anabolic steroids is what builds muscle. Corticosteroids do the opposite. They kill muscle and they reduce inflammation, which is why you need them. But otherwise it's wasting you away. So fix one problem by creating a bunch of others.
And the possibility of later in life, many more. But it did save my life, and I did learn to walk again, and I eventually ran half marathons and I ended up running distance on the beach here in California. So that was 1974 to 76. I got back on my feet. Bill, one of my old buddies who was a bouncer at one of the nightclubs when we were both 17, he had worked his way up at the Bob Seger organization to working under Punch Andrews, who managed Bob, as the road manager. And he hired me I was friends with this other band that Punch Andrews signed to manage and signed on to Capitol Records as Bob Seger was on Capitol Records. And that band was going to tour as the opening act for the Bob Seger Night Moves tour. And he hired me when I was on my feet well enough to road manage the opening band and be assistant road manager to him. And we did a series of dates, mostly through the Midwest. And that helped me get on my feet. And a lot of fun stories. One fun story, we were playing a place that was called Pine Knob. And the proscenium stage did not have a backstage. So whichever side of the stage you're on, that's the side of the stage you're on, unless you wanted to walk all the way around through the audience to the other side. And we did 7 nights, sold out nights at Pine Knob, 14,000 seats, standing room only. And like the 3rd or 4th night, someone taps me on the shoulder, and I turn around, and it's Bruce Springsteen. And he goes, "Hi, I understand you're the guy to talk to. I want to meet Bob." And I'm looking at Bruce Springsteen, and I'm thinking, there's no way around the back.
Yeah.
And I got 2 of the park rangers.
Through the crowd.
Yeah. So I said, okay, we're going to do this.
And this is Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah.
Even then, he's Bruce Springsteen.
Oh, yeah. No, it's 77.
He's fully.
He's been on time.
Bruce, capital B, capital S.
Yeah, he's been on Newsweek. He's been on the front covers. Yeah. And
I'd be like, "Hi, my name is Barack. Can you sneak me through through the side here?"
So I borrow 2 of the Pine Knob Rangers. All have these orange, what do you call them?
Like jumpers?
Jumpers with a hood.
Oh, yeah.
But they're plastic. They're like rain things.
Okay. Like rain slickers.
Yeah, rain slickers with a hood, with a good hood.
Yeah.
And I said, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to walk. We're going to borrow 2 of these. We're going to walk across. We're going to walk around. You'll keep your head down.
You're going to get disguised?
Yeah, I'll be in front, and I'll be act very macho, like get out of my way, and you'll be behind me with your head down. And if we start to hear your name, we will start running. And we got all the way halfway around to where the sound mixer board was. In the very back. Yeah. And I heard someone say, Springsteen? Is that Springsteen? That's Springsteen. And as soon as we heard that, we ran. Yeah. And the guys who were wearing orange on the other side, they didn't know why we were running because we didn't have talkies, but they knew that we were supposedly them. Right. So they got out of the way and we ran back. And there's people running literally down the aisle after us, and they stopped him. And he gave me his orange slicker back. And I walked him up to Bob Seger, and I said, "Bob, this is Bruce, Bob." And that was fun because later that year we did a concert with Bruce Springsteen at Michigan State. So I finally went to college. I should say that after that summer tour, I got into college, and I went to college at 22. And I went to Michigan State because I'd found out, even though I was in Michigan, that Michigan had the largest student-run concert company in the United States, larger than Arizona State University, larger than UCLA, larger than anything on the East Coast, even though the East Coast might have some prestigious schools with student directors. Right. We had a 12,000-seat field house, a 6,500-seat ice arena, a 3,600-seat auditorium, and I built a 450-seat I forget what we call it. Like a club or a small theater? For new acts coming up. Okay. We're touring, and they were like John Cougar.
Yeah, like a warm-up venue.
Yeah, but they were going to be famous. Right. And this was to give them a lead venue for one night on tour. Yeah. So John Mellencamp was one of them. Anyway, we did a bunch of acts. Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes, a lot of different bands. But anyway, so when I went to Michigan State, I got in to study communications with a minor in antitrust economics, and I started working at the concert company, and I had my Bob Seger tour jacket, and everybody thought I was the devil. They were scared because what I did not know was that people were staying a fifth and a sixth year in undergraduate for a shot at being the director of that concert company. Right. The staff advisor didn't tell me that.
Because it's like a legit, it's like a professional thing. Yeah. This happens to be a student thing. Yeah. It's professional.
But you're running it. Yeah. Yeah. But at the same time, even though it was national and running it, they didn't have professional skills training, and there was a production office, but if no one was in it, the phone rang. Yeah. So one of the first things I did was I advertised in the school paper for freshmen and sophomores to do office hours. And I taught them how to take a message, and we practiced taking messages. And that way, whenever you called that office from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, someone answered the phone, said Pop Entertainment, took them full message.
You knew what to say.
Gave it to the person. I trained them. Yeah. And I did a bunch of things like that. And what ended up happening was my junior year, there was a person that had a group of people that favored the outgoing director, had picked someone else to succeed them. That wasn't me, even though I'd worked my butt off. Yeah. And that person had some friends in the grip and gaffer area, you'd say, the riggers. But they didn't have anybody in the office, and nobody, and they had no experience dealing with the agents or any of that. They were sort of the beer drinking crew cool guy. Right. And so I quit. And I quit because I was managing some bands on the side, doing other things to make a living to pay for school. And I didn't want to be an assistant director my senior year in college. Sure. I'd earned the directorship and wasn't given it. So I left. And didn't do anything mean or rude. I just split. So I got a call 2 weeks later from the staff advisor asking me to come for a meeting. And I came, and the staff advisor said, we know what you did, and you shouldn't have done it. And I'm like, I beg your pardon? And he said, you told everybody to quit. The entire staff has quit. All the office people, all the other assistant directors have quit. I said, I'm sorry, I haven't spoken to any of those people in 2 weeks. I have no idea what the hell you're talking about. I left, and
that's all that happened.
I left. Yeah. I just said, I'm leaving. And it took him a minute, and then he got that I was telling the truth. And then he said, okay, this is obviously not working. I'm going to suggest you and this guy be co-directors, and you tell me what you want to do and what you want him to do, and let me see if he's okay with that. So I wanted to do all the stuff that mattered, and I wanted to let him do all the stuff that didn't matter. Yeah. And he said yes, because that way he saved face. Right. But 2 weeks later, he quit. He said he had other things to do. Yeah. And so I was the head of that.
I imagine there wasn't that much air left for him to breathe.
Right. So my team came in. They were great. We did a lot of shows. We did a show called 8 a Day for the 80s with 8 bands from around the world. which my road manager buddy from Bob Seger came to, and then some years later called me up and said, hey, I just saw a concert that reminded me of your concert at Michigan State in 1980. And I said, what was it called? He goes, I think they're calling it Lollapalooza. And that was like the first thing that was like that. So anyway, I get out of school, and my parents are yelling at me because I'm now 25. And what am I going to do for my future? And I had written to Geffen Records saying I wanted to come work at Geffen Records. And I got an offer for a meeting with the guy who was president of Geffen, David Geffen's company, long before he was partners with Spielberg and Katzenberg. But I also applied to 4 law schools on the phone. I called up UCLA and USC because I had a high grade point, a high LSAT. And they laughed at me. They both laughed at me and said, you have to write out an application, and it'll be for next year. And then I called Loyola, and Loyola said, well, we'll put you on a waiting list because you have a high grade point and high. But, you couldn't fax it out. There were no fax machines.
Right.
So you had to bring it with you. You had to bring proof. Uh-huh. And then I called Southwestern University School of Law, and the person on the phone said, well, that's not really an orthodox way to apply for law school. And I said, well, I'm not looking for a blessing. I'm looking for a vacancy. And so she thought that was funny that I said that. And she said, well, let me get the head of admissions on. You're in Michigan, right? She went to University of Michigan. Huh. And I didn't tell her that I didn't go to University of Michigan. But the woman gets on the phone. And I said, you did a master's before you came to L.A. at University of Michigan? She says, yes. I said, did you know the head of the concert company at University of Michigan? She said, Suzanne Davies. I did know her. I'm friends with her. I said, well, besides the grade point I'm telling you I have in the LSAT, would you call her and ask her what kind of competitor I've been the last 2 years? Because I had gone up there and interviewed with her, and she had told me if I was really smart by my senior year, I could be her personal gopher. And I had said to her at the time, I'd much rather be your competition. Thank you so much. And so I had become her competition. Yeah. So the lady called me back and said, if you can be here Monday in 4 days, we have a seat for you. And I filled out my application to Southwestern University School of Law on August 10th, 1980, when I got here. And I stayed on a friend's couch who had been the head of the concert company at Arizona State. And she had spoken so nicely of me that she had her boyfriend at the time come over because he wanted to make sure I was on the couch because she had spoken so well. So he wanted me to know that. Right. So, and then when they broke up, he called me up and said he wanted to stay friends. And I was a groomsman in his first wedding and best man in his second wedding. And we've been dear friends for 38 years. He's an amazing literary agent named Roger Strull. Anyway, so, and then in law school, I get into law school and I go take night classes at UCLA and entertainment law that aren't taught at my law school. Right. And I become the president of the Entertainment Law Society. I go to work in Beverly Hills for the Beverly Hills Bar Committee for the Arts, doing volunteer work. And I go to work for something else called the California Copyright Conference. Mm-hmm. And I work on the Visual Artists Symposium of 1980. But in the first year of law school, we argue a lot. And the guy that I argue against the most is this big track and field All-American, good-looking, top-of-the-cake-looking guy. Yeah. Who, any girl...
I love that phrase, top of the cake. Yeah.
He's built for tuxedos. He's a classically handsome guy. And he's tough, and we fight. And it's the end of the first year, and my roommate's leaving, and he walks by, and I hear him say, I got to find a place to live. And I turn around and I say, I need a roommate. And you can see everybody in the hall who knows us both going, oh, they're going to kill each other. That's going to be nuclear, right? Yeah. We've been friends also for 38 years. I go to his house every year for Thanksgiving. He ended up the head lawyer for Disney and marrying one of the prettiest girls in America who was the center for the UVA women's basketball team. Because he was so good in our first year, not just in the arguing, but in the writing, that he switched from Southwestern University of Virginia Law School, where he finished top of the class there. And he and I have been friends for 38 years. That's Philip Mull. Great guy, amazing guy, who has amazing sons and an amazing wife. One of the sons is in film school now. That's a fascinating story of that family on both sides. Anyway, so I get out of, so I'm in my second year of law school. Philip's taken me to see his sister, Erica, who is acting in an acting class because I'm interested in her. And my friends from Michigan have taken me to see a movie called The Idolmaker, which is Taylor Hackford's first feature film as a director, starring Ray Sharkey, as a manager who's always putting other people on stage because he doesn't think he has the right look. Right. He thinks he's not good looking enough, so he's always making stars out of pretty boys. And everybody's saying, that's you. You want to. I had laughed in the acting class and said to Philip, this looks easy. And the teacher had heard me and said, we have a guest who'd like to to perform.
We have a guest who'd like to embarrass himself.
Perform. So that was great because I told you about growing up in Detroit.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it was kind of hilarious that, like, I've been in street fights.
Yeah.
I've been in crazy car races.
Yeah.
Going 140 miles an hour. And this guy thinks I'm going to be embarrassed walking down in front of a room and doing exercise.
Exactly.
So I walked down, I did the exercise, and he said, "Oh, you're really good. Where'd you train?" And I looked at him and I said, "Detroit." And he said, "Thank you." That's all. He didn't ask another question.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So
but what happened was, between these things and between realizing I didn't want to be a lawyer, which I was unfortunately realizing, I realized what I wanted to do was be an actor, which, looking back at 1982, there was no way for a guy in Detroit to be an actor.
Okay.
I mean, unless you grew up in a family that was doing that.
And that's probably,
we knew about carpentry, we knew about plumbing, we knew about electrical, we knew about glass. We didn't know about acting and the arts. The arts were something you got to go see once or twice a year, maybe.
Yeah.
And if it was opera or ballet, why would you go? You wouldn't understand it, so why would you go? If it was classical, there was no one training us.
Right. You didn't have the vernacular
at all. Yeah. So this was amazing. And I decided I wanted to be a piece of meat, as one of the lawyers called actors that we brought in to speak at the Entertainment Law Society. Yeah. So I started training in January of 1982. My first experience was bad with a teacher whose teaching assistant attempted to intimidate the guys and show off for the girls, and that didn't go well, as you might imagine.
Never see that. Oh, wait, you see that all the time.
Yeah. So, but what one of the things that happened was that I invited him outside, and he was stunned because he didn't understand that he was asking for that. And one of the other guys that was in the class came up to me and said, "I like your style. Who are you?" And I introduced myself, and I said, "Who are you?" He goes, "I'm Stacy Peralta." I'm like, "Stacy Peralta, you say that like I should know your name." He goes, "Do you skateboard?" And I said, "No, I'm from Detroit. I race. I drive things with engines." Mm-hmm. And he said, "Oh, that's cool." He goes, "Well, if you rode things without engines, you'd know who I was."
This is true. This is true.
And it turned out he was Powell Peralta. He was Dogtown and the Z-Boys.
Yeah.
But we became friends. We built a bed together, a loft for me, and one of my places. We became friends for a long time. And I have a credit at the end of most of his movies as Mr. Berg, but that's most people don't know that.
Right. Okay,
I don't think I've ever told you that.
I don't think you have. I've seen that on IMDb.
Yeah.
I've seen that on IMDb on some of his stuff.
Yeah.
But I haven't. My current business partner, as you know, Larry, you talked about, he's a surfing guy, does some skateboarding.
Yeah.
So knows all those movies. Yeah. But I haven't seen those films.
Yeah, because he did Riding Giants. Yeah,
right.
So that's a Mr. Berg, and but it's not on the regular IMDb. It's only on the IMDb Pro.
Right.
So anyway, but I picked up some really good friends on the creative side along the way. Anyway, what ended up happening was the bad teacher and the bad experience, which I was invited to leave. A very lovely woman actress in that class said to me, "Oh, you sound really serious. You should be studying with Stella Adler." I'm like, Stella Adler. Mm-hmm. I've heard that name.
Rings a bell.
Yeah. So I went up and I went to the library and I read about Stella Adler. And it turned out she was teaching a class in the summer of 1982 on Melrose at the Matrix Theater or whatever it was called. And I auditioned for her assistant, Ron Burris. And he laughed at me because I had no skills. And he said, "You can pay to be in the theory class and you can pay to audit the acting class." So the scene study class. So I paid for both of those. And then in the first week or two of the acting class, I would come early, and when everybody would come, I would smile and wave at them, and I would motion that I had laryngitis, but that in a couple of weeks I'd be fine, and then hopefully we would act together. I would do this miming. I would do this with symbols. Yeah. And that was enough weeks for everybody to forget who was in the class and who wasn't. Uh-huh. And so by the third week, when Stella Adler would request a volunteer on stage, I would be on stage before she could say tear. She would get the volume, and I would be on stage. And they called me Lightning Bolt. Okay. Because I understood that it's like boxing, that the only way you'd get better is if you get up there. And I met some good friends in that class, too, that became, one of them became, Adam Rodman became a lifelong friend, great writer. So, whose brother Howard Rodman is a great writer, and whose father Howard Rodman was a great writer and president of the Writers Guild. Anyway, Adam Rodman came up to me and said, "You're like a punching bag. I gotta understand what motivates you to get up there every time and take a beating." And I said, "The only way I know how to get better." And he was like, "Okay, I get you." And so we've been friends since the summer of '82. Anyway, so she had a guest lecturer from China who she had our class stand before this guy came out. And she said, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to stand. So we all stood up. We're in the bleachers. And she said, it's not often in your life you get to witness a genius in front of your eyes. Today is such a day. Consider yourselves extraordinarily lucky. I'd like to introduce from the Peking Opera, the lead actor, William Chow. And so we all give him a big round of applause. And this guy kind of walks out on stage like he is confused. His suit doesn't fit him.
Uh-huh.
He's kind of skinny, wiry, and his suit doesn't fit. And he's literally almost looking upstage instead of downstage at the people. And he comes over and he gives Stella a warm greeting. And then he walks over and he looks at us and he squints. He squints like he's trying to look through the lights. And he say, I apologize. My bad English. I'm sorry. Today we talk about acting. And I knew it. I knew he was playing us. I just knew it. And so I got up from the bleachers and I got off and I walked around to the side of the stage. And I have to admit, I got on my knees on the side of the stage and I watched his lecture from the side of the stage. And he was brilliant. He was using his body in all broken looking moves to suggest a loser. He literally was playing the lowest of the lowest of the low so that all our expectations were lowered.
Right.
And he played us like a drum. And at the end, everybody was standing up, screaming, because he was amazing. The lecture was amazing. Right, he was amazing. Right. And he's with this woman who's backstage. And as he's trying to get by me, I'm crabbing left and right.
Yeah, you're saying, like, not going to
You can't go by. You have to teach me. You teach me. You're my sensei. You're my teacher. Yeah. Sensei, Japanese. But
concept.
So this woman hands me a piece of paper and says, there's an address. Make a list of who wants to study with him. Bring it to me. My name is Tina. So I make a list. I type it, last name first, with phone numbers. There's no emails. This is 1982. And I go to this address wearing my black leather, my black T-shirt, my black jeans, and my black cowboy boots. And I have long hair. And I walk into this place. And this place looks like Monaco. This looks like the high rollers table at Vegas. This looks like Macau. This looks like... And I'm like, these are Chinese people.
Yeah.
What is this?
Yeah.
And it's this restaurant in Beverly Hills called Mr. Chow.
Right.
And I grew up in Detroit. Chinese food is takeout.
Right, yeah.
These people have white tablecloths. All the men are, even the women, they're all wearing vests. They have ties. Everybody's walking around like I'm in England. Yeah. Like, this is really weird. There's silver.
Super fancy.
Super fancy.
Yeah.
And I walk in and they literally said to me, deliveries are in the back.
Yeah, you don't look like you're there. Yeah. You don't look like front of house guy here.
Yeah. And I said, I'm here to see Tina. And that kind of freaked him out because why would the guy like me?
They know she's somebody. Yeah.
Yeah, well, she was Tina Chow. She was the wife of Michael Chow from Mr. Chow, who happened to be the younger brother of the lead actor of the Peking Opera.
Yeah.
And because he was the younger brother, he was not allowed to be an actor. And he was sent to England to go to art school, where he studied with buddies like David Hockney and all these other guys. And he brought his grandmother's recipes. And the art students would eat his grandmother's recipes and freak out and say, this is the best food we've ever had. We've got to open a restaurant. And he would say, what are you talking about? The English people like Indian food. They don't like Chinese food. Yeah. And David Hockney said, I'll design it, the restaurant. You make the food. And they opened the first one.
I didn't realize Hockney was
involved. No, he designed all three restaurants. And nobody knows it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Nobody knows it.
I mean, I know your backstory with Mr. Chow, but I didn't know that detail. Wow.
I walk in, I ask for Tina. She walks up to me. She looks me up and down. She looks at the list. She sees it's typed. She sees its last name first. She sees all the phone numbers.
Yeah, you got it together.
And she's looking at me and said, you did this? And I said, yes, ma'am. And she says, follow me, and turns around and walks like at 100 miles an hour. I follow her to the back of the restaurant, up the steps, into the banquet room. She says, here, 6:30, Tuesday, Thursday, $150 a month each, payable first day of the month, at least 3 months.
Yeah.
Okay. I bring everybody, 6:30, first day. We all pay our $150. He comes out, gives us a lecture, starts making us stand, starts making us understand body movements, stuff that we never got. I mean, the teachers do it in the U.S., but very different Peking Opera training. Right. People don't even speak till they're 15 in the Peking Opera, and they've been working since they're 4. It's a totally different training. So he starts teaching us a westernized form of Chinese acting. 6 nights out of 8.
So a lot of physical emphasis.
A lot of physical. Yeah. 6 nights out of 8. At the end of our class, food comes upstairs. So now this group of 12 of us who are all, driving $100 cars.
Sure. And paying $150 a month for the class.
Are eating 6 nights of Mr. Chow food. Take home what you can't finish. Right?
Amazing.
And then one night a month, when they're, for whatever reason not, myself and one other actor, Kevin Major Howard, the two of us, are invited down to the table to eat with whoever is at the big round table, the celebrity table. So I'm sitting next to Neil Diamond. I'm sitting next to Barbra Streisand. I'm sitting next to Jackie Bissett and Andrei Godunov, who's kicking me under the table because he knows, because he's Russian, that because I'm a student, I'm not allowed to speak at the table. I sit there, I eat with him, but I can't talk, I can't make a sound. So he's kicking me under the table.
With you.
Yeah, he's giving me a hematoma until Jackie Bissett stops him. She goes, "Stop doing that. Stop doing that."
Man.
He's kicking me.
I always liked her, so I'm glad she stood up for you.
Yeah. Well, because I
liked her work. I never remember.
Because, I was looking at him and I was thinking, this guy's, I know he's a tough guy and I know he's a dancer.
I can take him.
But well, I don't know if I can take him, but I can break his jaw.
You make him hurt for a minute.
It will end my acting,
right?
But
hell of a story.
Yeah. So,
we would be here though.
Yeah, we sat with Jack Nicholson. We sat with everybody. So, and then 3 years into it, William Chow had some issues, and everybody, of course, went with him because he was the money card. And I had gotten to know his wife really well, Jane Chow, as well, and so she was left alone. Just put it that way. And so I kept her company until he woke back up. But at that point in time, they decided to move back to China. And I had made him lose face, which I didn't know about, because I
made friends with his wife
by keeping her company.
Copy that.
So they went back to China in 1985, and I just kept acting on stage like a maniac in 19 plays and 36 student films and 200 showcases in 400 days and all this other stuff. And I ran a restaurant and a bar in Hollywood that was called Fellini's. I was a GM there from 84 to 88. And I associate produced. I did a lot of producing work for other people where I didn't get credit. I just got small amounts of money.
Right.
And they got all the credit. And that was fine because that allowed me to keep acting on stage. Mm-hmm. And I did catering too. My first job out of quitting law school, I worked for a catering company called Along Came Mary. I was the truck driver. I did about 182 jobs. And that was a real education because it was right when AIDS hit.
Okay.
And I went from being mildly homophobic to feeding guys soup as they were dying.
That's amazing.
And that was 82 to 84 was a weird time because all these guys that when I met them, they were all strong, big guys. They were dying like flies.
Crazy.
And I actually was glad to get the restaurant job because I couldn't stand it. Couldn't stand to see it.
That had to kill your heart. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it's very odd when you look at people as possible enemies, and then you see that they're vulnerable like crazy, and then you're like, "What's wrong with me? Why did I see them as possible enemies?"
Right.
Anyway, that was a good education. My dad was colorblind. He only saw people by their character, so that was a good background for me. Because he would say, it's what people do. It's not what they say. It's what they do.
Right.
They watch their feet. Anyway, I've acted on stage for 7 years. I've done a bunch of other jobs. I'm in a cafe called the Rose Cafe in Venice. I'm reading a play. I'm doing a one-man show at a place called Stages, but I'm reading a play, some other play. And this woman walks up to me and goes, "Oh, where are you a waiter at?"
Right. Sees you working on a play.
Yeah, I'm reading a play in the cafe, and I said, "I'm sorry, I'm not a waiter, I'm an actor." And she goes, "Oh, yeah? Where are you acting at?" I said, "Well, tonight I'll be on stage at Stages." And she's like, "Oh, sorry." And I'm like, "No, you can come. It's a one-man show." And so this woman comes, and then a week later she brings her friend who's a casting director. And this woman has moved from being an exec producer in commercials in New York. She moved to LA to start a company representing technical artists, and she's got 14 clients on a list that are cameramen, I guess we'd call them cinematographers or directors of photography, production designers and costume designers, 14 names, and she's named her company Camera Masters. And through a series of events that are crazy, she invites me to work for her for a couple of weeks while she goes on vacation. While that happens, I make a couple of deals for a couple of her clients because offers come in and they're contingent on being answered within 24 hours. And they don't care where my boss is.
And this is pre-internet, pre-cell phone.
Pre-everything, yeah.
So
this is
you can't just like grab somebody and get feedback.
You can't. In fact,
you have to deal with it.
Yeah, she's in Mexico, and she's like, and I have the cameramen teach me what they've made, how often they've worked for these owners, what do other cameramen make, what's overtime, all that stuff.
Right.
And I make deals, and I get them raises, and I because I'm an angry actor guy now, and it's like
you're looking out for these guys.
Yeah.
These are the other side of the camera, but these are your folks.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, no, I'm going to get you a good deal.
She comes back, and the reason I worked 2 weeks for her was she came back and had Montezuma's Revenge the second week. So she asked me to stay on the phones. But she first said, I didn't tell you to make deals. I told you to answer the phone. I said, well, these were time contingent. And she goes, well, they don't make this much. And I said, well, they do now.
Yeah.
So she kind of looked at me. Huh. And then I worked 2 weeks, went back to the restaurant again to manage it one more time. And then she came at me in May of 89, offering me a 6-month assistant job, which was cool because I could walk from my home to her home. So that was great. And the money wasn't great, but she offered me a performance deal. Mm-hmm. And the deal was that the main thing was that I would get $1,000 for any client that I can bring her that she wanted to sign. Because I was going to be paid $300 a week cash. So that's not a lot of money. Even in 1989, that wasn't a lot of money. Right. But it was cash, and I could live on it.
It helped.
I was an actor, so I lived I was eating bags of rice and tuna cans.
Right.
So, but since we're negotiating this deal, and since she brought her lawyer in, I said I want there to be 2 conditions on this deal. And he's kind of laughing like this actor guy. And he said, what are they? And I said, well, number one, since she has the power of the pen, I want to be paid in full the day she signs them. So she knows that if she does decide to sign someone, she owes me $1,000 payable that day.
Okay.
And he goes, sure, it's her power of the pen. You're right.
Yeah,
so if she doesn't want to sign him, she doesn't have to. She doesn't have to sign him just because you want her to sign him. So sure. And I said, secondly, I don't want there to be a cap on how many people I can bring in this 6-month deal. Yeah. And he laughs at me.
Yeah.
And he says, you're an actor, right?
Kid's optimistic.
Yeah, he says, you're an actor, right? And I said, yeah. He says, I'll tell you what, kid.
He actually said kid.
Kid. This is Bob Brenner. He's a wonderful guy. His son, David Brenner, amazing editor.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, worked with Oliver Stone, many people. He says, if you can find her 5 clients she wants in 6 months, we'll not only give you $1,000 for every client and $1,000 for any client over that, we'll give you $1,000 bonus just for finding the first 5 in 6 months. And we'll put that in the contract. I said, great. So I have an open-ended contract, $1,000. Yeah. So I'm sending out her reels and doing her job, but I'm hunting clients. Yeah. 17 hours a day, 7 days a week, because I see a route out of poverty.
Right.
And I signed 36 clients in 3.5 months. Now, how do I do that? Yeah. This is Catherine Hardwick, who will someday direct Twilight, but now she's an art director. Uh-huh. And I've got her a movie where she's getting $2,000 a week for 20 weeks of prep and 20 weeks of shoot. It's a big movie, but a low budget. Right. So she's going to make $40,000 or whatever total. Yeah. And we're going to get, and the agency's going to get, I think the way it worked was she was getting $4,000. We were getting $4,000. I'd get 1, and my boss would get 3. Do you want to sign? Because I spend 10 and 10. So it was $2,000 a week. So it was a total of $40,000, $4,000 in commission, $3,000 to the house, $1,000 to me. Do you want to sign her? Yes. Okay, here's Bernard Salzman. He's a cinematographer. TV movie, 2 weeks of prep, 4 weeks of shoot. He gets $5,000 a week. That's $30,000 for the job, $3,000 commission, 2 to you, 1 to me. Do you want to sign him? So I never, ever walked anybody in the door without a job that already got her a couple of grand to $5,000.
You were just bringing her money.
I was bringing her money every day. Yeah. So she pays me $17,000 to buy a new car. Yeah. And then she tells me that I need to wait for the next $20,000. Why? Oh, I'll get it to you. You work for me. And so she comes back from lunch and all her files are on my desk. And she goes, what is that? I said, those are your files. She goes, why are they on your desk? I said, well, I'm going to bring them home. They're the only collateral I have against your breach. She goes, what do you mean? I said, well, you owe me 20 more grand. You're not paying me. So I'm going to take them home. And when you pay me, you'll get them back. And she says, you wouldn't do this to me if I was a guy. I said, you're right. If you were a guy, you'd be in the hospital. So her lawyer calls, Bob Brenner, and he says, I understand you threatened my client. I said, no, sir. My dad's military. I would never touch a woman or threaten a woman. If you'd like your ass kicked, however, you're invited to come over right now. And he's like, what do you mean? I said, what do you think I mean? I've worked my ass off. Yeah. I've fucking outperformed anything either of you thought possible. And instead of being honored, instead of having everybody say, you're amazing, thank God for you, I'm being told I have to fight for money I've already earned. And he goes, well, what do you want? And I blew up. Unlike my father, I blew up and I was like screaming at him. And he breaks my rhythm and he goes, what do you want? And I said, I want half the money and half the company. And he says, I'll take that offer to my client. The next day I woke up and I went over there and I had a check for 10 grand and I was her 50-50 partner. Wow. And that was 6 months after going to work for her.
That's amazing.
That was the end of 89. So I started 1990 as a partner, full on in Camera Masters, and I went to Sundance in 1990 for the first time.
Okay, all right.
And that began 13 years in a row of going to Sundance for the entire festival. And I made it my job that first year to meet 1,000 people in 10 days. And I found out when I got there that everybody left on the 10th day. Uh-huh. So I had to meet 1,000 people in 9 days.
Yeah.
And wow. I was pulling dinner tables out from where people were sitting in booths, walking around, shaking the hands, and then moving the table back, going right down because I had to meet my numbers.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, who is this crazy person? And I was
I'll just put the E for explicit. Don't worry. I'll let it fly.
Anyway, I did what I needed to do. I caused a lot of stuff. And I used Sundance to find myself independent filmmakers who needed new people to work with and to find new people who worked in the trades that I represented: cinematography, production design, editing, costume design, first ADs, UPMs, visual effects supervisors and producers. And I found them doing small movies and I built them up into bigger movies. And I became a part of the ecosystem, even though I was no one from nowhere. Pretty much every owner of every technical artist agency met with me to tell me that at some point they'd probably hire me to work for them. And I said, well, that would be interesting, but if not, see you in hell. Yeah. Because I intend to own my own business because no one's going to tell me how much I can make.
Right.
And that began, and then I bought my partner out in 1993, changed the name to Montana Artist Agency. We had 150 clients then. I tripled that in size over the next decade. I invested in 8 restaurants during that time, exec produced 2 or 3 movies. One of which won the Sundance Festival in 98. Smoke Signals. Yeah, great film. I was very proud of because of the message of that movie. And was able to sell that company in 2004 in a way where no client lost representation and no employee lost employment. I actually took a $50,000 discount 1 year from the sale if the new owner didn't fire anybody or drop anybody. And everybody made sure that I knew that had happened. And I gave him 50 grand back.
Wow.
Because my dad and my grandfather would have gotten out of their graves and wrung my neck if I didn't take care of the people who helped me build something to enough value that it could be sold. That if I didn't look after those people, they would have come right out of their graves and grabbed me and said, what did we teach you? Yeah. So I was able to be honorable to the people who helped me build that company. And I changed a lot of lives, and my life changed certainly during that. I certainly went from putting myself in the role of being a starving actor into the role of being a successful business owner and getting to do lots of good deeds and favors and charity stuff. And I actually started to get bored of being called sir, I have to admit. And at the time I sold the company, I sold it to an angry guy who was under me, which was perfect because you should always have an angry guy at the top of a company because he wants to make sure it gets done and done right. He unfortunately passed away 5 years later, and then the team that was there, that was mostly a team that I had hired, but a couple people he had added, they wanted to stay as an ensemble. I came back and helped with that for just a minute, and I called all the heads of the studio's production and asked them to make sure that if any of the other agents tried to bring a Montana artist client in that they knew was a Montana artist client, to tell them not to do that, to not let anybody bring in a client for 90 days. And I called all the agents, and all of them except for one were very respectful. And one guy tried
the competitors.
Yeah. They were all one guy who to the manor born, second generation, famous producer, father and uncle. He went after the client list as if, because that's how it's done in Hollywood. But, he was the only one. And I think his karma is assured. But,
I'll ask you offline. I might have 2 guesses who that is, but But we'll keep that offline.
But in 2014, the team which tried to buy the company from the widow, but the widow's advisor, cousin, accountant thought that wouldn't happen. They would never leave. They left en masse, went to APA in 2014. And they're all doing very well there, and they're all still there. APA, yeah.
That's how their below-the-line division
that's how it blew up.
Spun up.
Yeah, so the APA started their below-the-line division with two guys who came over from Paradigm.
Right.
Jay and Gil. And then 7 from Montana. And I do not attempt to be an agent in any way since I sold the company in 2004. Right. A lot of times people come over, old clients, even people I didn't represent but who knew me, ask me to make deals for them. Yeah. And sometimes there's a way where I can figure out where I don't feel I'm doing something that is illegal.
Right.
And I'll
that's a regulated, for people not in entertainment listening, that's a regulated job. You have fiduciary responsibility.
Yeah, licensed and bonded.
Yeah.
So,
but you can give advice.
Yeah.
You can put on the advice.
And I can talk to the other side and just say, this is what this person would like, and this is why they think they deserve it.
Yeah.
And they're an old friend or an old client, and they asked me to tell you that. And they don't have an agent. So you can consider me having told you what they wanted as if they had an agent.
Yeah.
And I just happened to prepare a document for you to sign that,
Yeah.
But I'm not saying I wrote it.
There you go.
So anyway, there's been good times where I've been able to look after old clients in the last 15 years while I've been doing other stuff.
Well, while you grab a couple of Tic Tacs there, I'm explaining for the audience what they get to hear. And we're just chatting away. Are you okay?
I'm great.
For a little bit more? Okay, great.
I'm great.
Great. I really appreciate you going through kind of that much of your backstory. I've been lucky to... You haven't really agented me per se, but you have been great with a lot of advice, very helpful when requested. Never volunteered out of turn, but always when somebody's ready and has the question, you give the honest answer.
Yeah.
How do you have a default way that you deal with challenges? When you have a challenge in front of you, is there some sort of a process that just kicks in automatically that you tackle the challenge? I mean, what's the first thing you do?
You ask a good question, because even if that's true, that you have a process that kicks in automatically, it came out of something.
Exactly.
And so what did it come out of? What's the genesis is what you're asking me as I hear it.
Yeah.
And the answer is that my father used to say to me that nobody owed me anything and that I owed myself everything. And at first, I don't really think I understood what that meant, but he said it to me over and over again from about the time I was 12 to about the time I was 18. And by then I got it, but when I came out here, I was not built for California. I was built in Detroit.
Very different.
And I remember the first time a guy tried to hug me, that I didn't understand why a man would do that to another man.
Right.
I had not seen that behavior modeled in Detroit in any setting.
Yeah.
And I was rather forceful in my pushing him away. And I remember seeing Hawaiian shirts and being like, "What is this they're wearing?" Like,
these aren't serious guys.
I don't know what this is. But
they
anyway,
don't have their black leather jacket.
Right.
Like I do. Yeah.
So I didn't understand what I didn't understand. Luckily, I've learned that I never understand most things, and that the only way I will understand them is to pay attention. Okay. But what happened, to answer your question, what happened was it became clear to me that the needle never moves without me moving it. Okay. And what I mean by that is that there are some people who, whether it's true or not, even in the way they've told it to me, there are some people who are good at what they do. I'm thinking of one gentleman in particular, who almost since he started his career in film production as a line producer, exec producer, he has a pleasing demeanor. He's a good-looking guy, pleasing demeanor. Almost since the day he started, he's always gotten called to be asked if he's available by all the right filmmakers. And he says, my career is insane. Never had an agent, never needed one, because if it wasn't Spielberg calling, it was Scorsese. And if it wasn't Scorsese, it was someone else of the same caliber. And this guy's making Marvel movies now. So, and he's great. I mean, he's really good at what he does. But I believe that it's true that his karma is that he finishes one thing, and the next call just comes in. And that's his life and he's got to be close to 55, maybe older now.
Mm-hmm.
And I met him 30 years ago. And even at that time when I met him, he said to me, I don't really look for work. I don't know why other people look for work, and other people ask me if I know of any work, but people always call me and offer me work. I'm the opposite.
Yeah. Okay.
And that just means that I have very rarely had the experience of, even with movies, even with the acting side,
right.
People always want to say, they're going to write a role for me or something, but it always ends up with me going after, like, hey, you're making this movie. Is there a role for me? I don't think there is. But could there be? Could there be a role for me?
Right.
Or unless I'm saving their ass. That's a different story.
Right.
You have one of those.
If they owe you one of those. Yeah. We have a whole story. That's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, it's another podcast.
That's a good one, though. We'll do a repeat and get into that.
So, but anyway.
Carl parachuted in at the 11th, not even the 11th hour, the 11th and a half hour.
Yeah.
Parachuted in and saved the day, which is a pretty good story. But challenges, adversity.
Yeah, and I guess I found out I had cancer in my nose, and I had to have my nose cut open, and they said you're going to have to see a plastic surgeon because we don't know how deep it is, and we're might be the whole side of your nose.
Oh, jeez.
And I was with this French writer-director at the time, and he was crying because he understood that I might be disfigured.
Yeah. And
he looked at me. He goes, "How do you just go do this?" And I just looked at him. I said, "I don't have anybody to back me up. What's the shirt I'm wearing say?"
Yeah, his shirt says, "This is my backup plan."
So I'm used to being the backup plan for other people, and for myself. So I guess I understood that my job in life would be that no one would call me up and say, "I want to take care of you." I've never had a girlfriend, take care of me. My parents were helpful to me growing up. I had a roof over my head, clothes on my back, food in my mouth. Certain things my dad taught me certainly work till this day. My mom introducing me to the art world and showing me what she thought was interesting. So, I'm a lucky boy. I've got arms that work and legs that work. Nobody owes me anything. So I guess the people that are motivated that I see are people who are motivated by a cause or a passion. Either it could be their response to a trauma, and that they've chosen to respond to the trauma.
It's reaction formation to overcome the...
Yeah. And to also make sure, or to do their best to make sure it doesn't happen to other people.
Yeah.
Because it was so terrible when it happened to them. That's their shaking their hand at God saying, this is unnecessary. And I'm going to protect others if I can. And I know that I have some of that in me. And in a way, from what I've said earlier, you might infer that I look at my dad in a way as sort of a hero. Certainly because after what he saw in Europe.
Well, sure, his military service puts him in that status.
He came back and he went to work every day and came home every day.
Yeah.
He never hit my mom.
That's heroic in its
own way.
Yeah.
He just showed up every day.
Yeah.
And he understood that was his responsibility.
Yeah.
And I got lucky. I got lucky to be in a good enough position financially when he was going down to take care of him. And, this is kind of personal, but the last thing he said to me was, he put his hand out for me to shake it. And he looked at me and he said, even though he had Parkinson's, he said to me in a completely clear voice, "Promise me you'll take care of my wife." That's my mom.
Wow.
I said, "Yes, sir, I promise you I will." And that was the last thing he ever said to me. You think about that. What kind of guy is on his way out?
Yeah.
That's what he's thinking about.
Right.
So, and I was lucky to move her from Detroit to LA, to put her at the beach, looking at the ocean. She had a great 10-year run on her 80th birthday.
Man.
I got to introduce her to Steven Spielberg and Jeffrey Katzenberg.
Right. I remember you telling me that story once.
Yeah.
And, that was really cool.
Over at Ivy at the beach, or Ivy at the shore, And she had a good time. And I buried her next to him with chocolates between them and her cigarettes on the far side of her. So
as it would have been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pall Mall Straits.
Okay.
So, the main thing I realized was that I was born without an older brother in a tough town, and I was small. So that meant I was the football until I could fight my way out of being the football. And most people will tell you that they've never seen me hit anyone, which is true, because I don't think I've hit anyone in over 30 years. But most people will also tell you that know me, that I've always collected my own debts without a lawyer, and that I've always taken care of any issue I've had one-to-one and face-to-face.
Yeah.
So that's how I was raised, and that's what I know.
Yeah.
I don't look for fights. I don't look for problems. And I'm not afraid of dying because I've lived way longer than I thought I would already.
Yeah. I've seen this. I would not want to be on the wrong side of you, though I would know you well enough that I don't think that would be an option at this point.
I agree.
But I would definitely not want to be in an adversarial position against you. Let me ask you this, as we sort of were beginning to sort of land the plane in the interest of time.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something that because I think to the people who know you here, again, you're actor and you're entertainment / tech business consultant and entrepreneur, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have a lot of credits and have all these accomplishments to where there's frankly a little bit of, within certain circles, there's a bit of a myth around you. Is there something that you think you're given credit for that you don't accept or you don't think you've earned? Is there something people put on you or that you don't want? Maybe it's true, but you don't want it. Is there something other people project onto you in that way, or something that trails you in a sense? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that during the years that I was an agent, that's a good question. I think during the years that I was an agent, people decided that I was ruthless. I don't know if you remember the story, but when I first started being an agent, a lot of people didn't return my call.
Yeah.
And I kept track of all that, of course. And I kept records.
Sure.
And I would write down I would call them 3 times in over a 10-day period. Yeah. And if they didn't return my call 3 times, I would go see them without an appointment. And I did that about 100 times between 1989 and 1991.
Okay.
And I would walk into people's offices and they would say, "What are you doing here? You don't have an appointment." And I would say, "Well, I've called you 3 times and I just want to make sure that your face worked and your hands worked. And right now they look like they work." And they'd say, "What?" And I'd say, "I called you 3 times. You didn't call me back. Your hands look like they're not broken and your jaw works. Why aren't you calling me back?" And they'd say, and I'd say, "I'm not calling for social reasons.
Yeah.
When I call you, I'd appreciate a call back. And I just wanted you to see me so you know who's calling.
Yeah.
And now I've seen you know, so I know who I'm calling. Sorry to interrupt your day." And I'd walk out. And I did that a lot, and no one had ever done that, I guess.
Yeah.
And there was one guy who started screaming at me, and I had an overreaction. I lost control, and I pushed him and his desk back into the wall, so he couldn't get out. He couldn't get up. And and that shut him up. It was a big desk, but I was strong. And I only did that because he was important. And I thought I'd blown it.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, if you're going to go atomic on me, I'm going to go atomic right back. And it was very interesting. We never did business until he left the studio. And he called my office, and I got on the phone, and he said, "How's my agent?" And I had no idea what he was referencing.
Yeah.
And I said, "I beg your pardon?"
Yeah.
And he said, "Who else?" And I understood immediately.
Yeah.
Who else would represent him? No one else had ever faced him off.
Yeah.
I was his agent for 3 or 4 years. And then he retired. Funny story. Yeah, I forgot about that. So I think there was a point where I heard that I was ruthless.
Yeah.
And I never really felt I was ruthless because I grew up meeting people who were ruthless. And I like my dad, I never start a fight.
So you don't feel like ruthless per se is... You don't want to be thought of in that as that.
No, I understand the be feared or, better to be feared or respected than liked. I get that. But that's a short-term game. Yeah. That's not a long-term game. Yeah. And as a legacy in terms of means nothing. Sure. I mean, we don't live in times with actual by the sword. There's cultures that are still like that around the world, but we're not in them. So, finding a way. The one good thing about being an owner that you learn when you're meeting payroll every week after week after week, if you're an independent, if you're a freelancer, you do a job, you do it well, you leave well, you give gifts, you write notes, you've put in your reports, everything's been done, and you wait for the next gig. But if you own a company and you're dealing with the same people every week, 52 weeks, every year in and out, and they're not leaving their job and you are still in the company, then you have to figure out a way to be part of that ecology, to look for the charities they care about and to donate to them, to make sure they know about the restaurants that you're a partner in. So if they want to come eat there, you'll look after them. I mean, there has to be something, because these are the people you're making your life with. If you're fortunate enough to have a wife and kids and have a family and be part of that community, that's who you're growing up with. And even if you don't, all of them do, and you're growing up seeing their kids grow up and their lives as they unfold. So, if there's anything else, I mean, I guess nobody wants to be thought of as stupid or blind to what's in front.
Yeah.
So it's like I've always attempted to understand what I don't in terms of new technologies and learning the next wave of where things are going. Yeah. And I think that with the crypto stuff and with the blockchain, that I'm reading Blockchain Revolution now. It came out 3 years ago.
Okay, yeah.
And I know I'm behind that curve. But I feel like at least I'm attempting to grapple with a new vernacular and grapple with an understanding. Not because I want to be a blockchain billionaire or a crypto
but you want to understand
currency. It's the world, and it's the way the world's going. And if a distributed ledger makes relations more transparent and causes more people to be honorable globally, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
Totally. Come on, let's go. But I don't understand it, so I'm attempting to understand it and to read enough so that if I ask questions, I've at least done the groundwork to pay respect to the people living in it, that I'm not asking, newbie questions that I should have just read the book first. Does that help? Anyway.
That helps a lot. Yeah. And I have, I'll do one last question.
Shoot.
Because of our time. Because I could just talk to you a long time. So again, I know you pretty damn well. I think if I knew you even better, to use that rhetorical device of this show title, what's the best advice that you've either given or received or ignored? And the corollary might be, what's the worst advice that you hear perpetuated that you wish people would just drop? What's something that really sticks with you as very practical and actionable that other people could apply in their life or consider for food for thought? And is there anything that you think is killing people? Or you can pick one or both parts of that.
Well, actually, it's funny. The last thing you said is that if you notice, there's a tremendous upsurge in suicide amongst younger people who don't look, and I'm not talking about Parkland survivors or Vietnam, or Iraqi or Afghanistan vets. I'm talking about, and I'm not even talking about people who are being bullied, who are transgender or LGBTQ, or I'm saying there's just this insane amount of, I cannot go 6 months without hearing of someone I know or someone I had dinner with killing themselves. And I have to say that the people that I'm hearing about or that I've met that have killed themselves are not bad people.
Yeah.
They're not people who are full of hate and who look to hurt others. So to me, the world's losing a lot of people whose hearts are too tender to handle the hardnesses that they see or personally experience in society today. And, the best advice that I have is that to reach out and to reach out to those you care about and make sure that they know it, especially the more isolated they are. I mean, if they're in a happy family unit and you see that things are going well with them and there's no signs of anything, that's one thing. But if you know that people are on their own, they're single, they're older, whatever they are, and you're not letting them know, or someone just lost a partner that they were with for a very long time and it's like half of their body is gone, that kind of thing. I think it's important. I think the best advice is that any kindness or any good deed that you do that you don't need to do is the best business advice I would give anybody, because being a good human being very rarely results in bad things happening. You can make a mistake. You can be kind to someone who's a junkie that's not wanting to get better, or that's been beaten so badly, abused so badly, it's all they know, hurt people.
Yeah.
I get that.
No.
But I'm just saying that in general, not even both from a humanitarian standpoint and also from a pragmatic standpoint, that doing kindness and showing concern and interest and wishing people well and being available to witness, when someone needs to talk, to do all those things, even though it may not be what's convenient for you, it makes the world better. And if it makes the world better, that means that it has a direct effect on everybody and everything you say you care about. And why wouldn't you participate in that? And that's the best advice, is to be a participant in making the world a better place. It doesn't have to be bold moves. It doesn't have to be showy moves. It doesn't have to be writing checks. If you can't write checks, you don't have to give money you don't have. But, it's been said, you hold the door open for someone, you smile at someone, you tell them they look good, you thank them for their service, whatever it is, it changes the energy of the day, and it ripples, and that matters. The worst advice I think I've ever been given was that don't do anything unless you're just naturally good at it, and you succeed without much effort. That otherwise
I wouldn't have done anything.
Well, yeah. So I hear you.
Literally nothing would have happened.
Right. But the reason I hear people saying that they're saying, don't, punch yourself in the face. Don't lead with your face. Don't be going after these things that you don't have a gift for. But the truth is, and I was not taught this as a kid growing up, is that process is everything. And that sucking at something for a long period of time is really important to get through, to not suck, to be okay, to be better than okay, to be good, and then to be good of note, and then to be really excellent. That those are all the steps that come from not giving up, and from focused attention over time, and from incremental successes, small little steps that add up each day eventually. Into looking back, they look like big things, and you're like, how'd that happen? Well, it happened because you didn't give up, and because you kept learning, and because when someone hit you, you said, thank you, can I have another? But you also learned to duck, or to not take every punch directly in the face.
Don't take the full hit. Yeah.
You don't need to take the hit. You learn to let them glance off you, and you played the long game, which is that someday you'll be really good at this. And it matters to you, and you'll be really good at something that matters to you. And maybe that will turn into money, or maybe that will turn into people acknowledging it, or maybe it'll turn into a sense of having used your own life well for yourself, and that it doesn't matter what anybody else in any other setting does. But the other best advice is you can't get your time back. So since you can't get your time back, you can sometimes get your health back. You've been sick before. I've been sick before. But since you can't get your time back, who you spend it with and how you spend it is a mark on your understanding of the gift you've been given of being sentient and having choice. And the other thing I would say, me, I don't use the word try or should, because I think Yoda was right.
You call people out on that.
Yeah, I do. I think it's only do or not do. So I am a big fan of people who fail and continue on failing until they don't fail. But I don't like the word trying, because trying means that I'm telling you I might fail. Yeah. I'm telling myself I might fail, and I'm making peace with that before it happens.
Yeah, it's a preemptive excuse.
Yeah, I'd just rather, I sucked at that, and I got glass in my face.
But I learned this.
And I'm keeping moving, and next time it won't hurt as bad, and next time maybe I won't fall, and next time maybe I'll stand tall, and then eventually I'll know how to do this, and then I'll forget that it was really hard to learn.
Well, you taught me the concept of paying time to something.
Thank you.
And Carl, I appreciate you so much.
My pleasure.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
We will do a round two sometime.
Someday soon.
Thanks, man.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, that's the show this week. Please visit crazyinagoodway.com to find out more about Carl or my other shows or the previous show guests on this or any of the other podcasts that I'm involved in. You can also contact me with any feedback, suggestions, comments, or if you want to somehow be involved with the show yourself. Thank you again for listening. I'm Brendan Davis, and I'll see you next week on If I Knew You Better.